Welcome to the IGNTD Recovery podcast, a new way forward for anyone looking for answers but feeling left out. If you've been searching for empowerment, triumph, and purpose, you've found them right here. You won't hear the same solutions, and you're not going to have any excuses to fall back on, because IGNTD Recovery allows heroes to rise and become their best selves. I'm Dr. Adi Jaffe, and I can't wait to be your guide on this journey. Are you ready to become an ignited hero?
Hey everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Ignited podcast. Again, I'm Dr. Jaffe, but Sophie's not here with me. This is the Ignited Recovery Friday episodes of Ignited. Thank you again so much for joining me. Hopefully you caught last week's episode where I talked about the point behind this, why it is that I'm doing this, and a little bit about my own road. We're going to learn more about that here today with what I call the first secret that is different about Ignited Recovery than most other things that I've seen there. And the number one secret is that beating addiction is not about quitting, and it never was. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how the focus that everybody keeps putting on quitting or on abstinence, that's why my book is called The Abstinence Myth, is actually causing more failure, causing addicts to lie, causing the overdose increase that we're getting in this country. And if we keep going this way, it's going to doom us to failure in the long term. Now, what do I mean when I say quitting is not the main thing in beating addiction? That beating addiction is not about quitting. You know, when I talk to a lot of people about the fact that abstinence should not be mandated in a lot of treatment, that we should not start by abstinence, a lot of people look at me kind of crooked and say, well, don't addicts need to quit? Isn't that the thing? I mean, even some of my own staff, some of the people who help me, when they first hear this, they go, but wait, this is the main thing that I've ever heard is that addicts have to quit. And the first thing that you need to understand, and if you're struggling, you will understand this right off the bat, is people don't use drugs only for the effect that the drugs produce chemically. Now, I have a background in neuroscience and I do a lot of the work around the psychopharmacology, et cetera, related to drugs. So I will talk more about that. But if we understand how addiction develops, and that is what I dedicated the first decade of my life to studying when I went back to graduate school, we understand that the vast majority, I would say essentially all people who we end up calling addicts, started out liking their use, started out liking substances or porn, gambling, food, whatever it is, to deal with symptoms of something else. If you remember my story from last week, what I talked about was the fact that I really liked alcohol because it helped me deal with my social anxiety. Now, a lot of people at the time didn't necessarily know that I had social anxiety because it's not something we talk about. Talking about your mental health struggles is pretty taboo, so we don't do it. But as soon as I found alcohol, as soon as I drank enough vodka that night at the sleepaway camp, I got it. All of a sudden, I could talk to other people comfortably, and I didn't care. I didn't care if I made a fool of myself, which I might have. I didn't care if girls liked the way I talked or not. They may or may not have, but this fear that I had, this constant dis-ease that I had inside of myself had subsided. Now, pretty quickly, as in literally the next weekend when I got back home, I joined some of those other friends again on the weekend to drink. And it was now the second weekend in a row that I went drinking. And that continued to pattern until by the time I was 18 years old, weed had joined the picture as well. But I was then drinking and smoking weed pretty much daily. Now, if somebody would have caught me at that point, 18, 19, 20, 21, etc., it would look pretty obvious that I had a drug and alcohol problem. And that's what we do to a lot of people. We look at the end result, we diagnose somebody based on the end result, and we believe that our solution will lie there. You drink too much. You use too much weed. You snort too much coke, shoot up too much heroin, or smoke too much crack. If I can stop you to do those things, so the messaging goes, you'll be able to get better. The problem is that what we're missing is that the only reason those problems developed in the first place is to overcome something else earlier. And so the analogy that I like using with a lot of people is asking somebody to quit on the front end of rehab, of addiction problems, etc., is a little bit like saying to somebody who just broke their leg, hey, yeah, I will offer you physical therapy, sure, but you actually have to leave your crutches over there and come to me alone. Or on the flip side, if somebody comes to us with ankle pain, it would be a little bit like saying to somebody, you know, I can absolutely cure this ankle pain for you. You come in, I can schedule you, I have an appointment tomorrow at noon, and what we will do is we will amputate right above the ankle, and I will guarantee you'll never have ankle pain again. We are solving the symptom, not the underlying problem. And then we wonder why there's such high failure rates in addiction treatment. The results are terrible when we look across the industry. Anywhere between 5 to 30% success rates, depending on how far away you look from when somebody actually ends treatment. So if you record whether somebody is able to maintain abstinence right after treatment, normally we get rates as high as 30, 50%. But the farthest you get from that moment, the moment they actually finished their course of treatment, the numbers just fall apart. You get out to a year, and there are a lot of studies that suggest 5 to 10% success rates of abstinence continue. But the question is even worse and more complicated than that, because there are a lot of studies that show us that even those results are questionable. Because if you call somebody and you ask, hey, you went to treatment with us 6 months ago, are you still sober? They're likely to say yes, even if they're not. There are a lot of studies. I hold a webinar online at ignitedrecovery.com that you can check out to what I dive in a little bit deeper into some results. But there's a study I saw out of University of Cincinnati and Brown University that suggests that even though 30 to 40% of people in, let's say, outpatient treatment report that they drank in any given treatment episode, about 96 to 97% actually consumed alcohol during that time period. And then we call addicts liars when what we've actually done is we've set them up for failure. We told them the success is quitting, even though most people don't quit. And then we call them up and say, are you successful? And we hope that they will answer honestly. So quitting is not only an ill-advised first step for people, but what ends up happening is a lot of people quit. I quit drugs on my own about 5 or 6 times. I just went right back to using pretty quickly, sometimes within a couple of hours. Sometimes I lasted as long as 2 to 3 weeks. Quitting is not the problem. It's what happens when you quit that is the problem. And if I don't set you up for success in terms of what will happen when you quit, and I have you quit first, a lot of people find that their problems get worse. And this is why only 10% of people who struggle with drug and alcohol issues, with addiction issues in general, go to treatment. We've got about 25 to 30 million people who struggle with this every year in the US, but only 2.5 million or so who go to get help. Those statistics are ridiculous. I talk about them in the Abstinence Myth book. And by the way, you can go to www.theabstinenceMyth.com to get an excerpt from that for free right now. And then the book itself will be out within a month or two. There is no other area in the medical field where once somebody meets criteria for a problem and are told that they do, only 10% seek a course of treatment for it. It only happens in addiction. Not in diabetes, not in cancer, not even in mental health issues like depression, schizophrenia, and things of that nature. Why is that? Well, for decades, we've been blaming addicts. We've been saying, well, addicts are not motivated. Their brains are so damaged that they can't understand what's wrong with them. They're in denial. Instead, my suggestion is we've been doing it all wrong. We've been telling them, hey, you rely on alcohol to get through the day. You can barely make it through 5 hours without getting drunk or getting high or using porn or eating because life is so overwhelming. If you want help, I need you to stop all those things and then I will offer you help. And what do? They run away. But of course they run away. They're not yet ready to get a solution like that. So Ignited Recovery tells people that you don't have to quit to get started. Now, I want to be clear, 40 to 50% of the people who come to me to get help with using less drugs, using less alcohol, using less porn, whatever it is, 40 to 50% end up deciding in the end that they want to quit completely. I'm not saying that abstinence is not the right option for a lot of people. I'm saying it's a terrible starting point for some. And we need to stop using it as the guard at the gate. We need to stop using it as the first thing you need to do in order to get help for addiction. Because it's a little bit like telling a cancer patient, cure yourself first and then come and I'll give you radiation. It doesn't work like that. We have to create a system that people want to run to. We have to create offers and treatment approaches that an addict, somebody who is struggling in their life, will run to. And I will tell you firsthand, after having worked with hundreds of people, that if you start the conversation very differently, the way that we do at Ignited Recovery, helping people with what it is they want help for, there's no resistance to treatment. It's not an easy road. It can still be difficult, but people want to participate. And that's why the number one piece that makes Ignited Recovery different is it doesn't require quitting. Because quitting is the wrong goal. Quitting should be a symptom of success, just like using was a symptom of the pain beforehand. I hope this made sense to you. And as I pointed out before, there are a lot of places where you can come get this information from me. I write all over. The Abstinence Myth book is one of the places you'll be able to get that. You can get an excerpt for that right now. And ignitedrecovery.com has an online workshop that is completely free for an hour and a half that dives in deeper into some of these. These were our 10-15 minutes here for today, for this Friday. Thank you so much for tuning into Ignited Recovery. This is this week's episode number 2. See you next week.
Thank you for tuning in to the Ignited Heroes Recovery Podcast. I really hope you found the information here useful and that we'll see you back here next week. And look, I want to make sure that this podcast is the most useful it can be for you, so please let me know by emailing info@ignited.com if there are any specific topics or questions you'd like to have addressed. As usual, if you like this episode, I would love for you to leave us a 5-star review and rating. Thanks, and see you next week.